Kevin, I'm going to have you read first here in just a minute. It's going to be the first one there, John 4:27 through 42. After I do the introduction, I'll call on you for that. We're in John 4 and the beginning of John 5 today as we continue looking at the Gospel of John. 2 weeks ago when we were looking at this in chapter 4, we were looking at the woman at the well, and we noticed several things there about that story. But the story there in Sychar is not finished yet. We're still going to look at some things here at the end of the chapter today as we finish up that story. Jesus' encounter with the sinful woman has opened her heart to this living water that he's been offering her. And as he speaks to her, she rushes back in the city. She leaves her water pot, which is why she was out at the well anyways. She rushes back into the city, and today the townspeople are going to come out and see Jesus and visit with him. And so got kind of a little bit of long reading here, but Kevin will do it for us. We'll start here in John 4, starting with verse 27, when you're ready.
At this point, his disciples came and marveled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" The woman then left her water pot and went off on her way into the city and said to the men, "Come see a man who told me things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" Then they went out of the city and came to him. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, "Rabbi, eat." But he said to them, "I have food to eat of which you do not know." Therefore the disciples said to one another, "Has anyone brought him anything?" Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do not say, 'There are still 4 months, and then comes the harvest.' Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for harvest. And he who reaps receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life, that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into the labors." And many of the Samaritans of the city believed in him because of the words of the woman who testified, "He told me all that I ever did." So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. Then they said to the woman, "Now we believe, not because of what you said, for we ourselves have heard him, and know that this is indeed the Christ, Savior of the world."
Thank you so much. So let's review by asking some questions, by looking at some questions together, and let's review the story, and then we'll make some application here on some of these things. What surprises the disciples as they come back to find Jesus at the well? Okay. And that just wasn't done in their society. Even in our society, we are careful about those things, not being together at times, not being alone at times, and certainly and then also, why else do you think? Was there anything else that maybe might make it unusual? She's a Samaritan, okay, and so the Jews and the Samaritans didn't really have a lot to do with each other, and while they worshiped the same God, they worshiped differently. The Jews were trying to follow the Old Testament law. The Samaritans had some things mixed in besides the Old Testament law. So what conclusion does the Samaritan woman draw about Jesus' identity? He is the Christ. He's this Messiah that we've been waiting for, that we've heard about, that we want to come. And so who does she go and tell? The men of the city. Yeah, maybe the women didn't talk to her. They don't go out and get water with her, that's for sure. She's going out there at noon instead of when they would go out in the morning. And so she talks to the men of the city, and he has told me everything I've ever done, which is kind of funny. If any of you have watched those Chosen movies and they portray her, that's her line, that she says it over and over and over and over again. They kind of make it a running joke as they deal with that episode on that series. What kind of food does Jesus have that the disciples know nothing about? His food is to do the will of the Father in heaven and to finish his work. And so that's his food. Now, does that mean he's some sort of breatharian and doesn't need to eat any food or something? No. He you listen to George Norrie in the middle of the night. You know what I'm saying? There's a guy in the middle of the night that has all these weird people on. Anyways, no, he has to eat like the rest of us, but that does fulfill him as this woman is certainly not filling his physical need, but his spiritual need for food, right? Yes, sir.
This makes me think about, what Jesus even quoted as a statement. Man does not live by bread alone, but every word that comes from God, basically. But there's a twist here. It's not just the word coming from God. It's actually then doing what it says to do. And that's what he says, that's my food. Not only do I listen to God, but I do what he says to do.
Yep, very good. Not only do I listen to God, but I do what he says to do. Very good. Anything else you're thinking there? So at first, we see this conversation between Jesus and his disciples. And when the disciples return from buying food, they're amazed to see him talking. They urge him to eat. They bring him food. His food was to do the will of God. Lift up your eyes and look at the fields, he says, for they are already white of harvest. And he who reaps receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life, that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. So what might we learn from some of this? Let's make a little bit of application, and then you can add some things to this as you think about things. Certainly opportunities abound. They can be overlooked. The disciples could not see the fields white for harvest, and we might be a little judgmental here of them by saying maybe they disliked the idea of talking to Samaritans. Maybe they didn't think about them or care about them, but certainly the opportunity was there. Jesus could see the opportunity, and sometimes we don't always see the opportunities around us. Jesus knew the fields were white. He talked with the woman at the well, and as a result, many of the people there in that city became believers of Jesus, not only because of the woman's testimony, but because she invited them to listen to his words themselves. And we think about maybe Acts chapter 8 when Philip goes to the Samaritans and teaches them later. Maybe this was getting them ready for when they came and spoke the gospel to them. And we too can overlook fertile fields. There are people who would be receptive to the gospel. Always I think the easiest people to talk to are our friends and family. Back in the 80s was the catchphrase, friendship evangelism. But that still seems to be the best. It's easier just walking up to a total stranger and trying to teach them the gospel. But certainly our friends and family, people that we know. Sometimes that's the best way. Those fields are fertile too, and we can overlook our family. It's amazing to me as we've gone through the years, we'll say, can we talk to so-and-so? And they're oh, that's my brother. I don't want you to talk to him. Or it's weird sometimes. People don't want you to talk to friends and family. But those are good contacts and good people. Yes, sir.
A lot of
Well, good.
Friendship, evangelism is effective, does work, but walking up and talking to those you haven't previously met can also work. I don't believe Jesus had met the Samaritan woman before he came to the well.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Jesus had already spent time with his disciples, and he'd already been teaching them. But by them coming back, seeing him do what he was saying, telling them to do, it was a good thing. So he actually did multiple things because he was talking to women who weren't valued highly sometimes, and he was also talking to someone of a different race, which means he was showing them, everyone has value. Just like you said, we need to open our eyes and talk to these people. And sometimes family is not the easiest.
They're not always easy. But we look at some of the people that came last year and already this year, friends certainly. People have been brought because of their friends.
Samaritan woman doesn't know much. She just knows that this person told her everything she'd ever done, and so she expects he is the Messiah. She has a very small knowledge about Jesus, but yet she can go and tell everybody what she knows. We don't have to know it all. We certainly would know more surely than this Samaritan woman did at the time. So we don't have to know everything. We can still spread the word.
Okay, good.
It's not for us to make a judgment on who will obey the gospel. We have no way to make that judgment. But as humans, we may look at this person over here or that person over there and whatever we surmise about who they may be, and we may make a determination that it's not worth talking to them about Jesus. They're so far away, they wouldn't even grasp it. But that's not for us to decide. It's not for us to determine. Jesus said, go. And he said, teach. And we need to humble ourselves and do what he said. Leave the rest to him.
Very good. So opportunity abounds. God's will has top priority. Doing the will of God, distributing the living water is more important than eating. Eating is important, but we must eat to live. However, his life illustrates that we may sometimes have to put off eating to offer the living water. And living water is available to all, even the sinful Samaritan woman. I think that's what we're all saying. She properly responded to the offer of living water. She left her water pot, went to the city, and said to the men, come and see a man who told me all the things that I've done. This is not the Christ, is it? Chapter 4, 28 and 29. And think of a moment about someone who's been a sower in your life, helping you start a closer walk with God, or someone who has patience to help you see the spiritual need in your life. And so sometimes we need to pray, ask God to open our eyes for those of whom we can share this living water with. And sometimes it's just being there and continually being there, being available, getting to know people. And then when they have their troubles, sometimes that's when they will talk to you. Be open. Anything else? Michael Inge, if you'll read this next one, if everybody picks up there about verse 43. If Mike Inge will read through 43 through 54.
Now after the 2 days he departed from there and went to Galilee, for Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they also had gone to the feast. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine, and there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe." The nobleman said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your son lives." So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, "Your son lives." Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better, and they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him." So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, "Your son lives." And he himself believed, in his whole household. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee.
Okay, thank you. Here comes somebody with hope against hope. They have somebody ill in their family, and he has fear and he has tension and anxiety about his son's sickness. And so the story is fear, faith, panic, promise, helplessness, hope as all this goes on. And so let's just review it a little bit. What kind of welcome does Jesus receive when he returns to Galilee? Verse 45. They received him, and so they're excited. They have he's been there before, and they're excited about all the things he had done before. They're looking forward to what he will do this time, and certainly he's going to make another splash here. Describe the man who comes to Jesus. He's a nobleman. Okay, and what request does he make? Come heal my son. Come see my son. Come be there with him. And how does Jesus heal the son? He just speaks the words. He doesn't have to even be there, does he? He can speak the words and take care of it. Go your way, your son lives. And so that, he leaves and goes back. And so that shows us that this man has some faith in Christ. And what news do the man's servants bring him on the road? Your son is alive. Your son is alive, and he lives. And so how do the royal official and his family respond to this? They also believe in the Christ. They believe in Jesus. And so a lot of road work is being done here. A lot of things are being done. And Jesus is welcome in Galilee. He may be welcome more for maybe the miraculous rather than to be in God's presence. But when a man comes and asks for his son, he speaks the words and the man departs. Slow down a minute and think about this. And this is somebody really believing, somebody really trusting in Jesus. A picture of a living faith, a breathing faith, a walking faith. And he looks at Jesus, and he may have before had some idea, knew about what had happened last time he was there. And does he have the power to do what I need him to do? Is he faithful to his word? Can I put my child's life in his hands? And so he may have come a little questioning, but certainly he has some faith in him, because we see he just goes with him, goes back without Jesus alone. And so what does it mean to take Jesus at his word? What would that mean to you and I if we take Jesus at his word? Trust? If we believe what we're going to do what he says? Okay. To trust in him now would be to believe he's the Son of God, certainly. Yes, ma'am.
Means that we believe that he can do what he says. I think that's where when things get really hard, we go back to reading what his promises are and believe that he's able to do what we're asking him to do.
We believe he can do what he says. And that carries over into our life, doesn't it? Yes, sir.
Sometimes even Christians can have an experience that rocks their life so badly, that tests their faith so strongly, that they begin to doubt. So why did this happen to me? And why did this happen to the person that I love? You know? And God, show me a sign that I can believe that you're still with me and not against me. And taking Jesus as a word means you don't have to go through that. You don't have to go through that mental process. You just have to trust. Even when things don't go the way you want them to or expect them to, you still need to have trust in his promises and his word.
Very good. Dave?
The statement here makes me think of President Reagan. Trust but verified. He trusts, but then he verified the hour, which, I thought was super.
Yep. He said, okay, you say you're going to do this, and then he double-checked on it. Good. Certainly, as this guy goes home, I'm sure he's expecting it, but he might be wondering, too, until it happened, until the people come to meet him. Yes, sir.
I guess notice this, but this is very early on in Jesus' ministry. In verse 5, it says this is only the second sign that Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. And when you think about the gravity of the situation with this nobleman's, essentially his son being on his deathbed, really is a strong demonstration of faith. And if this was later, you might see where Jesus has healed others and reputation is stronger and more popular. But that passage in verse 5 says this is very kind of early on here, and yet this man still was willing to walk away from Jesus, having trust that his son was going to be healed.
Okay, good. John kind of numbered. John only gives us 7 of the signs, but yes, it would still be really early on, and not a whole lot to base everything on yet. But how much would it take for us, we wonder? How many healings is enough? And yet, we know that human, you think of the Israelites, you wake up every day and the food's ready and you gather it, you boil it, you fry it, you bake it, it's there. And you get to the promised land and we're like, oh, no, you're not strong enough to help us take the land. Sometimes we wonder. They certainly weren't ready to do everything and trust in God as they should. Taking Jesus at his word is at the heart of our faith. If Jesus says you're forgiven, do we believe him? Do we let doubt and guilt rob us of our peace? If Jesus says nothing can separate us from his love, why do we worry about being unworthy and not doing enough? If Jesus says that we can do all things through him, why do we not live victoriously and settle for mediocrity? And so I have there some things on the board. Can we trust these promises? What does that mean to you? I will never leave you nor forsake you. What do you think Jesus is saying to you? I'm going to be beside you as you go through this. What does it mean? And may God, and my God shall supply all your need.
When you're going through a difficult time, you can use his word to comfort you, even though you haven't yet arrived at, what it is that you're needing. But he's going to make sure that you get it based on this.
It's a promise, isn't it? How about we have boldness and access with confidence through faith in him? about, I am he who blots out your transgressions. That's from the Old Testament, but who is God? Who is this God that you trust in? Has he forgiven you? Of course he has. Don't keep beating yourself up. If you're a Christian, don't keep, I'm not good enough. Well, no, we're not, but now we're no longer, as Isaiah says, in those filthy rags, but Revelation 17, whatever, we are in white linen now as we have been washed clean, because God is the one who blots out our transgressions. That's great things to think about, all these promises. Do we trust in them, or do we just kind of go over them? And so we might ask, why is it so important to pay attention to how and when God moves to meet our needs? Why would that be important to know that he takes care of these things?
Gives us a faith that we can share with others. We can tell others what God has done for us, and we can give specifics, not just generalities.
Make sure when bad things happen to us, we can know that God's going to do this. He's done it before.
Certainly. And I think some of us go through things and then someone else starts going through the same thing, and we can be there for them too. That's part of being in the family. We have a special, we have lost our spouse, so now I can reach out to that person who's lost their spouse and pray with them, and just talk with them, be with them. I've done this, I've walked this path. Now you walk in this path. Certainly, the more we realize that God keeps his promises, the more we can trust him to meet our needs in the future. And of course, he's going to meet our needs through his providence. And we don't always know what's happening until sometimes we look back on things, but certainly he's always there, isn't he? Always there. Jackson, I'll call on you to read the next one if you would. John 5, 1 through 15, please. Go ahead.
After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, a pool, which is called in Hebrew
Bethsaida.
Bethesda, having 5 porches. And these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the spring of the water, was made well of whatever diseases he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he already had been in that condition for a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to him who was cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your own bed." He answered them, "He who made me well said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" When they asked him, "Who is the man who said that to you. Take up your bed and walk. But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn. A multitude being in that place. Afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have made me well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well.
Okay, so we're shifting from the noblemen, the royal officials who came to beg for help, and now he's going to find somebody who's not begging for help from Jesus necessarily, but he's been 38 years in this infirmity. And so describe that man a little bit. Just tell me something that you learned about him as you were reading there. How long has he been ill? 38 years. And so he's basically, his life is defined by that mat, and he's just laying there. And what does Jesus do for the man? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he heals him. Rise and take up your bed and walk, and Jesus heals him. He visits this pool of Bethsaida, which is near the sheep gate in Jerusalem, constructed by Herod the Great. It has covered porches. It has 2 pools. And some of the people believed that those pools had healing powers, and so that's why they laid around the pools. And a great number of disabled people were waiting for something to happen. And so Jesus walks among these people, and he settles on one man there who's been wrestling for a long time with his disease. The man waits day after day, week after week, year after year without anything happening. In what way are we like the invalid? Helpless, many ways, yeah. On our own, we can't do everything that we need done, can we? Sometimes people even reach hopelessness, I think, in their life. So maybe this man, he's got some hope because he's been there, but he's like, I can't get down there. I can't get down there. I can't get this done when the water's stirred up. I can't get in there. So who's upset when the man is healed? The Jewish people, because he was healed on the Sabbath, okay? And so they have a rule for that, and they don't want that done. Yes, sir?
As far as I can tell here, there's no evidence whatsoever that this man exercised faith in Jesus. The same with Lazarus. The same thing.
Yep. That's a good thing to point out. He's different than that last guy. He comes up to him, says, your son's well, and he goes back to where his son is. He finds out he's well. This guy doesn't even know who he's talking to, right? He doesn't even know who this is. And so that's a good point to make. And so Jesus heals without even the person's faith. These Jewish men were not concerned about the man, were they, or his good fortune of being healed, but they were really concerned about the Sabbath traditions, weren't they? That's what they were concerned about. Pay no attention to the wonderful and helpful deed that Jesus did and helped this lame man who had been around for 38 years, but they were offended. He was carrying his mat, and Jesus healed on the Sabbath. And we think back to the Samaritans, maybe, and we were judgmental maybe on the apostles earlier. Maybe they weren't all that excited about being in Samaria and talking to those people. But yet Jesus pointed to them and said, these people, these people are ready. They're ready to hear. Certainly the second one, he was ready to hear. And this man needs what Jesus has. They should be thrilled. This man is delivered from his suffering. The Sabbath seems to be Jesus' test case over and over regarding the traditions of the Jews. The law was pretty straightforward. By the time Jesus, the rabbis had created, though, this huge body of material that was on top of the law, was on top of the teachings. And so it was called the Mishnah. It prohibited all kinds of things, 39 classes of work that were forbidden, and one of those was transferring an object from one place to another. Of course, God had given them the Ten Commandment law, and there was a lot of things in there. It's more than just those 10 things. As you read through Leviticus and Numbers, you read a lot of different things there that they were to do, but they enlarged upon even that, and there were evidently another 613 different commands that they came up with. 365 of them are negatively stated, 248 of them were positively stated. In addition, they added countless other restrictions that ended up being an impossible burden for these people to bear. And so Jesus' attitude and actions on the Sabbath day displayed its real meaning. This is a day of rest. This is a day of blessing. But they had turned it into a day of burden with all those extra things. And there's just no way that they could do all these things or not do these things. And they forgot God's purpose. It was for them, to help them. This is another one of the 7 miracles recorded in John. They were written down to produce faith in the reader. John 20, 30, and 31. These are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believing you might have life in his name. And those miracles were powerful demonstration of Jesus' deity. And because of them, people started believing in him. The miracles were indisputable. Even Jesus' enemies had to admit that he had performed these miracles. Something else you're thinking there? I don't want to rush over you too fast here.
It says Jesus found the man in the temple, so the man didn't just, walk away. He did go to a place of worship afterwards. But also, even though the people were picking on Jesus and persecuting him for doing good stuff, he still helped people. So that's kind of hard to do sometimes, but I know. Like if you have siblings, you totally understand. You still need to do the right thing, even though people may pick on you, to do the right thing. And it was vitally important for us to believe, for us to read the story, for them to believe, so that we can know Jesus cared about us and we need to follow him, because the alternative is not, it's unthinkable.
That's interesting. He does go to the temple. Now, he could have been there to see the priest because he's been healed. And depending on all that was happening, there were certain times that they had to go to the priest under the old law after they were healed of things or gotten better from things. Or he could have been there also, as you say, to be worshiping God, giving God the praise. And he finds out who it was who healed him. Like these people who saw Jesus face to face, we must decide too who Jesus is. The woman at the well, she decided who Jesus was. She figured out he was the Christ. The man, the nobleman who comes to him, figures out who Jesus is. He says, well, I'm going to take you at your word. And this man who didn't even know who healed him finds out who Jesus is. And as we think about our answer, who Jesus is, we should keep in our mind that he healed the sick, he gave sight to the blind, he turns water into wine, he multiplied loaves and fishes, he walked on water, he raised the dead. The one and only who is divine, the Son of God, has accomplished all of these deeds, and guess what? He has made promises to you and I, and he will keep those promises, won't he? He will stand behind them. What else are you thinking? Anything else as we wrap up here today? All right. Be looking in the bulletin on Thursday morning when it comes in your inbox, and you'll see where we're going to be next week and what we're going to cover. And thank you all very much.